Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J-Reels Podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The winter solstice is on Saturday with Christmas not too far behind. I'll spread a little cheer and some jeers as I'll start putting some gifts and coal around the tree as I get into all that's happening in the world of sports, as this is the J-Reels Podcast with Joe's J-Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And with a huge football weekend ahead, kicking off tomorrow night with college football and the first ever 12-team playoff. And that's where I'm going to start. I'll get to the NFL, of course, unpack that, Week 16, which the schedule is awful. I know you have a good game tonight, Denver and the Chargers, and then you have the two big games on Saturday, but after that, it falls off a cliff. So I'll put that on ice, but right now, college football is going to be front and center because for the first time ever, we're going to have a playoff, which a lot of people have anticipated. A lot of people have thought that this day would never come. And when it took the committee and the NCAA to just expand to 4 teams, it seemed like that was going to be something that a lot of people would probably not necessarily frown upon, but would say, we want more. 4 teams isn't cutting it. And we've seen about a dozen years, maybe a little bit more than that, of the system and how it was with the regular season and having just 4 teams qualify. Now you have a scenario where you have your opening round beginning tomorrow night in South Bend with Notre Dame, and then you have the 3 games on Saturday, which unfortunately is going to get swallowed up by the NFL. And I understand Houston and Kansas City, a lot of people are going to look at Patrick Mahomes and how his ankle's going to respond, and who knows what his status is going to be as of right now. And then you have Pittsburgh and Baltimore, which in essence could be for the AFC North. So you'll have those 2 games front and center on 1 o'clock and 4:30 Saturday, to where the college football slate's going to start 12, 4, and 8 throughout the course of that day. But how I look at it is, I think whomever's going to be into the college football, they will tune in, they will watch. I know that with both of the NFL games being on major networks, that it's going to take a lot of the sting where the 2 games at 12 and 4 for college football is on TNT and Max, I believe, as well, for those who want to stream. So yes, it's going to lose a little bit of luster, and the rating is not going to be as high as it would be if it was on a major network. But for those who are going to gravitate to the college football and say, the hell with the NFL, I'll wait till we get to January when it comes to the playoffs. But I still find it intriguing just to know that you're going to have wall-to-wall football here pretty much starting from tonight with the NFL through the weekend to Monday and even Wednesday. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of girlfriends, a lot of wives, partners, etc. that are going to be frowned throughout the country, and who knows, even throughout the world, considering the games on Christmas are on Netflix. But back to the playoff, the interesting storylines that, to me, I'm going to look at here over the course of these next couple of days, and we could get into the individual games, which we will do so. But the first and foremost thing that's going to be highlighted, and it's no surprise when it comes to the storyline, and I'm just going to talk about the games this weekend. I'm not going to talk about Oregon, Alabama, Boise, or Arizona State. That will wait till next week. But right off the bat, Ryan Day is going to be the big giant spotlight put on him because of how the regular season ended, that game against Michigan where they lost in their building, and having to deal with the aftermath of that, not making it to the Big Ten championship, falling out of the top 4, not having a bye. And to me, how I look at it is that if Ohio State doesn't get out of this round, and mind you, they have a very tricky road. And you could even look at it from a standpoint of Oregon may have gotten screwed, because considering that they're the 1 seed, and we know that they're going to have to blow this up when it comes to teams that have won their conferences and have a bye, because we all know Boise and Arizona State do not deserve byes. And yes, I get it that they did win their conference championship, but when we look at the big picture, they are certainly not one of the top 4 teams in the country, or 2 of the top 4 teams in Boise and Arizona. And that's going to be looked at, and I'm sure that's going to be revised here. If not next year, I would think the following year. And even though they're going to expand, I believe, to 14 teams when it comes to the playoff by the time we get to 2026, I would think by then they'll have a better idea as to how the committee is going to select which teams are going to have those buys for the top four, and not just by winning their conference title. So back to Ohio State, Ryan Day, one more time. All the pressure is going to be on him to win this game, and it's not going to be an easy one going up against Tennessee. And even if they do beat the Volunteers at home there in Columbus, they're going to have to go play against Oregon. And Oregon, they played them earlier this year, lost by a point, close game. But if they're going to get to a national title, and I read somewhere that Coach Ryan Day is going to be on the hot seat if they don't get to a national title, well, when you have Tennessee and then Oregon, and who knows who you're going to play after that if they get that far, I mean, that is a daunting task. It's not as if they're playing a bunch of scraps or have a red carpet to at least a semifinal, let alone a national championship. But even with that being said, for everything that has happened here over the last few years with Ryan Day not beating Michigan at all over these last 4 years, not getting to a national championship, coming close a couple of years ago with C.J. Stroud losing to Georgia on a last-ditch attempt for a field goal effort to push them into the final. There isn't much more to say if you're Ohio State, if you're Ryan Day, even the quarterback, Will Howard, if you want to give him any dap, a guy that is good, not great, and has shown a lot of flashes throughout the course of this season. But there is no other team. And yes, Texas is going to be second on that list when it comes to storylines for this playoff. But if Ryan Day doesn't get out of this round, and even if he loses a heartbreaker, if he loses a 34-31 game, or doesn't matter, it could be 10-7 or 50-49. If he doesn't get past this round, there is going to be a lot of people in the Columbus region wondering what had gone wrong here for the Buckeyes, considering that they pretty much beat everybody in front of them throughout the whole year. I mean, think about this. All right, Oregon, you lose to them in their place where they had to go to Pacific Northwest. All right, fine. But you beat Indiana, you beat Penn State, two teams that are actually here in the top 12. But then that loss to Michigan, that is the one that's going to sting. And I don't care what anybody's going to say, especially the students that are there, the faculty, the people who support that team. I'm sure that they would trade a long playoff run here in spite of them losing to Michigan, as opposed to beating Michigan and then losing either tomorrow or really Saturday or somewhere along the way before they even get to a semifinal or national championship. And I get it. It's Michigan or bust, but they have bigger things to look forward to, and at least they have the one game there in their building come Saturday night. So it's all right in front of Ryan Day. A pressure-packed way to a title or to at least the next round, but I'm sure he wouldn't have it any other way. So that's number one. Number two has to be Texas, because for everything that they've done here throughout the course of the regular season, mind you, they were perfect unless they played Georgia, and we saw what happened in the regular season and obviously in the SEC Championship. But with Steve Sarkisian, the coach, and Quinn Ewers, a guy who has had his moments and has had his injuries too, and with Arch Manning waiting in the wings to be the quarterback of next year and beyond, this is Texas's time to shine. And Texas, how I look at it, not to say that they have a clear path, and we'll get into the upset potential for some of these teams and how this could possibly play out. But for the Longhorns, knowing that Clemson, who had a barn burner of a championship game in their own right, for them to now stake their claim as one of the top teams in the nation and a team that should get to at least a semifinal. So I don't want to hear Sarkisian in bad spots, and he's going up against a guy who knows his way around winning in a one Dabo Swinney. Now, this isn't a vintage Clemson Tiger team as we know, but they're going to have a lot of fight and a lot of gumption, and whether or not they're going to be able to pull off an upset down in Austin, that remains to be seen, and we'll talk about that when we get to the game in a little bit. But Texas, right now, a lot is riding on this game for them to get past this round, and they will go ahead and play in the next round Arizona State, which could be a game. Arizona State is one of those teams that they could fly high, play well. They have a very good running back, as you know, and a one-cam Scatterboo. And anything could go or anything could happen when you get to that point. But right now, first and foremost, Clemson and how they need to get past them, considering that Clemson is the bottom seed of this bracket, Texas being the 5 and Clemson to 12, you know all the pressure is going to be on the Longhorns to win this game and advance. And obviously that's going to fall more so on the shoulders of the quarterback. Head coach, yes, but the quarterback's going to have to perform. Because would you be surprised that if Ewers doesn't get on track here in the first half, would you think or be surprised that the coach is not going to put Arch Manning there to try to save the day and have them go on to the next round? I can see that happening. But we'll have to see what's going to shake down there when the game is going to be played. I believe that's your 4 o'clock game on Saturday. Yes, it is. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, that's on TNT. As far as the third storyline, yes, we could talk about Penn State, but Penn State, you would think, against SMU, and even though they were valiant in that loss against Clemson in the ACC title game, but we could talk about Penn State, and even on top of that, we could also break down what Indiana is going to do, because I think Indiana, for everything that they've done here in the regular season, although they lost at Ohio State, but are they going to be able to hang? Are they going to be able to be in a pressure-packed situation really for the first time? Because we could talk about Ohio State, where a lot of people looked at that as a big litmus test for a team that had the best record in school history as far as their football team is concerned, and for them to now have the bright lights and to play in prime time, the first game to kick off this playoff, are they going to be a team that's going to be in it in the second half? Will they even be in the game in the fourth quarter? Or is this going to be a drubbing by halftime and Indiana's going to be pretty much out to pasture come that second half? And we know with the coach, Curt Cignetti, who has a little bit of bravado, a little bit of hubris, and what we've seen there toward the end of the year, whether it was trying to methodically go down the field and be respectable against Penn State in the second half, or in that game against Purdue, running up the score and throwing the ball all over the lot when they were up 49-0. Who knows what you're going to get from this coach? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of backtracking if this team doesn't perform well, or they're going to say, hey, nobody expected us to be here, so on and so forth. That will have to wait and see on that. But Indiana is also, I think, another storyline to see whether or not they belong. And they do belong, not based on what the committee has shown and what they have been able to decipher in this process, but even as a fan watching from afar, granted that they didn't make it to a conference final, and certainly a team that did not play a big-time schedule despite the fact that they're in a big-time conference. But how I'm going to look at it is I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they must show and prove here that they belong on the stage by putting forth a good effort. Now, if they lose a close game, 27-17, let's say, if Notre Dame somehow, some way, 20-17, they get the score to pile it on there and put the game out of reach, all right, I can live with that. But if they lose 34-10 and we're nowhere in the game past the first quarter, I, A, won't be shocked, and B, come Monday, I'm going to have to pound on them. I mean, that's all there is to it. So those are your storylines there heading into these games. And I'll go by the way it's scheduled throughout the course of the weekend, starting tomorrow night with the game in South Bend for Notre Dame and Indiana. Now, Marcus Freeman gets another shot here, making it into the playoff. And you would think, with them being in their building, and Notre Dame, another team that hasn't played a lot of people this year, and Northern Illinois, with them being their only loss, I don't want to hear about USC and a couple of other teams that they had on their schedule that, oh, well, Jay Reels, you got to give them at least some credit for what they've done. All right, we could say that, and they do belong. No ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. But now we get to a point where with Freeman and Riley Leonard, the quarterback, I mean, this isn't a high-flying offense to say the least. And Indiana, we're going to see what's going to happen there with Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, who has had his moments. But again, I got to see how he's going to perform in a big game. And will the fans there in South Bend, and who knows how many people from Bloomington are going to make the trek to Notre Dame Stadium and touchdown Jesus, etc. But to me, I think this is going to be Notre Dame. They're going to play from in front. I'll actually be surprised if the Hoosiers are going to be in this game in the second half, maybe they're within 2 scores by halftime. So let's say if it's 24-10. All right, I can see that, 24-13 for that matter. Fine, but they're going to have to be closer than that if I'm going to be a believer on whether or not this team is going to be in it midway, deep into the third quarter, or dare I even say the fourth quarter. So Notre Dame, unless they're going to take this team lightly, unless they're going to think that, we got this game in the bag, and therefore now they're in a quandary late third quarter to where, let's say the Hoosiers are down by a point, it's 17-16, and they have the ball, then I'll really have my eyebrows raised high to think that Notre Dame took them lightly. But I would think they're going to mean business, a playoff game in their building, and I could see this being a blowout. Indiana, I hope they're going to hang in there and play well, but to me, I think the bright lights are going to be too big for the Hoosiers, and therefore I think Notre Dame's going to go running away. I'll say 34-17. Now, Saturday at noon, you'll have SMU and Penn State. And Penn State, to me, which Drew Aller is going to show up? Is he going to be the guy that's going to not deliver and not be able to play big when the stakes are high? And SMU, they're playing with house money here. So for the Mustangs, you know that they're going to play fast and loose. I get it that they're going to have to go to Happy Valley, and it could be daunting with 100,000 in the building, or who knows, with the Christmas break, maybe the students have fled, or maybe they'll wait till after the game in order for them to have a mass exodus to go throughout the country with the students and to get ready for a Christmas break. But to me, this is about Penn State and what the head coach, James Franklin, is going to do. I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to be fine. But to me, it's on the quarterback, because we've seen him have good games, but then we have also seen him have not so good games. And I understand he's been injured throughout the course of the year, and I get it that Penn State, they're going to show up defensively, they're going to play well, and to me, that's going to be the key. I think as long as they play the stout defense that they're known and capable of doing, that they'll be able to slow down the Mustangs. They will certainly thwart whatever possibilities. Now, if they're going to start turning the ball over and give SMU opportunities, that's a different story. But of course, you can't predict that. But I would think for Aller and for James Franklin, knowing that he needs to have a big win under his belt, because he's another one. He's a guy that he could have his 9, 10, 11 wins, but he can't seem to win the big one, whether it was in the past or just this past year, Ohio State, or even Michigan in years past. Him not being able to get over the hump, and SMU is not, to me, in the stratosphere of those aforementioned teams, or Michigan of last year at least. He's going to have to go out there and win, whether he wins by a point or if he wins by 50. But I would think Penn State, they'll win comfortably here. I think they're going to have a good showing, and I'm sure Franklin, who I believe got an extension there at Penn State, will at least live to see another week. I'll say Penn State. And I think SMU, listen, do they have a shot? Absolutely. But just like they had a slow start against Clemson last week, I could see them having a similar start. Considering Penn State and their defense, they're going to be flying. But I could see Penn State getting out to a lead, and then SMU all of a sudden starting to get its bearings and maybe make a run. But I believe Penn State will thwart them and have an opportunity to win a game there. I'm going to say Penn State 28, SMU 20. Your 4 o'clock game, Clemson and Texas. As I stated before, Quinn Ewers, a guy that could put up a big game, but then also with his injuries and his ankles, who knows? He may not even last through the game. And Clemson, here's a team that has a coach that knows how to win, as I mentioned. Now, he doesn't have the players. It's not as if he has Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson there on his sideline. But how I look at it, if Clemson is in this game in the second half, I'd be, I don't want to say scared, that's too strong. I'd be worried if I'm Sarkisian and company. Because I could see Texas getting tight. I could see them getting to a situation where Ewers is going to squeeze that ball tight and is going to try to find a receiver where he's going to throw it in tight windows. He's going to try to do too much. And therefore, Clemson can have some upset potential here in this game. But I think Texas is one of those teams that you didn't come this far only to come this far. And granted that the only team that they've been able to falter against this year is Georgia. So Clemson, I think they're going to put up a good fight. Would I be surprised if Texas blows them out? I can't say I even would be surprised that if Texas comes flying out of the gate to the point where Clemson, they're on their heels and now they're trying to get themselves together to a point where they start to put some series and some offensive drives together, but to me, it'll be too little too late. So I'm going to look at Texas here as a team that has some big aspirations and has a lot going for them, knowing that they've been a top 3-4 team the whole year. And even though they are currently 5, so it's not as if they have fallen that far down in the rankings, but I see Texas here putting up a big effort. I'm going to say Texas 30, Clemson 17. And then the nightcap is as good as it gets with Ohio State and Tennessee. And for Ohio State, what more can I say that hasn't already been said when it comes to the coach, the university having to put up big here? And if people are going to think that Ryan Day could lose his job, I don't know about that. Now, if he gets blown out in the game, who knows? There may be some explaining to do if you're the head coach. But I would think Ohio State is another team. They've had to sit on this here for the last 2.5, 3 weeks. I'm sure that Ryan Day has read all the press clippings. And if the game is close in the fourth quarter, I could see he and his team getting tight. But they cannot play like that. And what's interesting is that even though we could talk about home field, but that could also be a detriment because a lot is going to be expected of Ohio State to come through and deliver to get to that next round. And Tennessee, listen, they are going to be a tough out. There's no way to slice it. But for the Buckeyes, in order for them to advance, they're going to have to play from in front. And they're going to have to play not only just from in front, but they're going to have to play big from in front. They can't have a 7-0 lead and then 10-7 and 13-7. No, they're going to have to score touchdowns when they have opportunities in the red zone instead of kicking field goals. Because if you're going to keep Tennessee in the game, that's when they're going to burn you. And Tennessee, again, SEC, they've had a gauntlet in their own right, facing the Alabamas, the Georgias, the LSUs. We know the teams that they faced. And how I look at it here is that Tennessee, wouldn't be an upset by any stretch because when you think about the upsets, you're going to think about the 5-12 and 6-11 matchups, not so much the 7-10 and the 8-9, similar to the NCAA tournament, but right here in this game, with it being the primetime game, the highlight game ABC, not up against the NFLs we know because of the windows that I discussed earlier with the 1 and 4:30 windows for the NFL that they have that day. But when you're Tennessee and you have a running back like Dylan Sampson, who is very good, and if he's going to control the clock, and if Tennessee's going to try to use its ground game, because the quarterback, who I can't pronounce his last name, people, Nico Iamaleava, I guess I just pronounce it. I know they're going to try to chew up clock, move the chains, and try to keep Ohio State at bay in order for them to win this game. And I think that they can. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee wins this game. And I don't have anything against Ohio State. Not a Ryan Day fan in the least. But I think this is probably going to be the best game of the weekend. Probably your closest game. Watch them all be close. Even though I had these scores 28-20, 30-17, at 34-17, etc. But this will be, I think, the best game of the weekend. I think this will be the closest game. I can see this coming down to a field goal game. And there's a part of me that wants to say Tennessee. And you know what? The hell with it. If there's going to be any team that is going to be, if quote-unquote, pull off an upset, although this wouldn't be an upset, but because the game's in Columbus and because of everything that I spoke about, even if Ohio State plays them in front and gets off to a big lead, they're going to have to keep piling it on. They cannot take the foot off the gas. And if they do so, that's where they're going to get burned. I'm going to say Tennessee 29, Ohio State 27. Because the running back's going to be huge. And if he doesn't have a big game, and if Ohio State, their defense shows up, then I think they're going to thwart Tennessee in their offense there. But all games are fascinating. Looking forward to tomorrow night. As far as the upset special, listen, can I see Indiana going into Notre Dame and winning? I cannot. I'm sorry. Clemson has a better shot of winning in Texas, but even then, I think that's going to be a reach. So yeah, I mean, that's how I look at it. And Penn State, SMU, could they beat the Nittany Lions? I mean, of course, any one of these teams can, and we don't know we can't predict turnovers, we can't predict field position, we can't predict all those things. But to me, I would think that if there's going to be an upset over the weekend, and not to say it's going to happen, I've already given you my predictions, I would say SMU going into Happy Valley, only because I think Texas is too good. And like I said, they've come this far not to come this far. Penn State, they have beaten the teams that they normally have beaten. And SMU is that type of opponent where they should beat and probably will beat. But can you trust James Franklin in a big spot? That is tough. And I can't see Indiana going in beating Notre Dame. I mean, it's as simple as that. So SMU, to me, I think has the best of the four when it comes to an upset special here over the weekend. All right, now I'll keep my helmet and shoulder pads on as I clear my throat there, where we'll get to some NFL and a week number 16. We'll kick off tonight in LA. That was a flex game. Tonight would have been Cleveland-Cincinnati, but they said, we got to get that game out of here. Move Denver and the Chargers up, and that's a big game because the Chargers do have tiebreaker over the Broncos as of right this second, and with the Chargers a game behind Denver as of right this very moment, and after a putrid game on Sunday against the Buccaneers, you would think that they're going to be pumped up and ready to go against a division opponent that they know if they beat them tonight, they'll have the tiebreaker advantage with the sweep. So if they end up with the same record at the end of the year, that means either a possible trip to either Pittsburgh or Baltimore, as opposed to having to go to Buffalo potentially, maybe even Kansas City when it's all said and done. So I'm sure that the Chargers know that if they win this game, they will control their own destiny to have a 6 seed and have at least a road game that does not mean Buffalo or Kansas City. So keep that in mind when you're watching the game tonight. Listen, I can't trust the Chargers. I know the Broncos are due to lose a game here, and the Broncos have played well. Remember, they started off 0-2 this year, and since then they're 9-3. Goes to show how they performed here over the last 12 weeks of the season. So for the Chargers, to me, this is a not huge game. This is an enormous game for them. Not only just for them to beat the Broncos and for everything that I've just detailed, but even just for their psyche. Because the Buccaneers beat the brakes off of them on Sunday. And this Charger team, although they have the quarterback, but they don't have a lot of weapons. Yeah, they have a couple of good running backs, but it's not as if they have guys that can stretch the field. It's not as if they have big-time playmakers at the wide receiver or even tight end position. So how I look at it is that the Charger defense is going to have to show up, but we know the Bronco defense is just as good, if not better than the Chargers. This could be a very good game. To me, it's a coin toss. I think I'd have to favor Denver a little bit, but knowing that they have to wipe off the stink of that game there on Sunday against Tampa, I would think that the Chargers would show some pride and maybe win tonight. But to me, that's more going out on a limb because I think in my gut, Denver's probably going to win the game. But I'd like to see the Chargers win just to make it intriguing there as far as tiebreakers go for a Week 16. And then you have the two games on Saturday, which are great, which I'll get to. But some news and notes of the week, which I think are very interesting when it comes into the weekend. And I'll start off with what's happened in Atlanta, where Kirk Cousins, who has just been god-awful here over the last few weeks, I believe his last 4 games, 1 touchdown to 9 interceptions, and that's not cutting it when you got paid $100 million guaranteed, 4-year contract, $180 million, and there's people even saying that after this year, will Kirk Cousins be off the team? Now, do you understand the cap hit this team is going to take here next year if they just happen to release him? There's no way Kirk Cousins is going to be a part of this team. So they have money invested into him and tied in, even not just next year, but 2026. So you have to get to that 4th year in order to cut bait. And even then, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of salary cap hit. But unless the ownership, Arthur Blank, and the GM is saying, you know what the hell, we'll bite the bullet. But that's a bullet that is just too big Forget about even just to bite, but to swallow. So Cousins is going to be your guy next year, I would think, unless they just say the hell with it, which would be very surprising considering the contract he signed. But for Michael Penix Jr., the number one pick, to come in and now be the starter, now he's going up against a team that is literally a soft landing. But there is some danger tied into that. The Giants will come to the ATL this weekend, and the Giants, we know they have been just in an absolute free fall and abysmal season. One of the worst in recent memory, and that says a lot considering that the Giants, ever since they won Super Bowl, what was it, 46? 12 years ago, they have made 2 playoff appearances, and all those other seasons after that have been anywhere in the vicinity of 5-11, 6-10, 6-11. I mean, just god-awful. And even if the Giants run the table here the rest of the year, that means they're going to be 5-12. And that's not going to happen considering on their schedule, they still have to go to Philadelphia, which I understand they may not play for much, although there could be a 1 seed waiting in the wings, possibly in the last game of the season. And the Giants also have the Colts, who are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. So it's not as if they have a rough schedule. It's not easy, but the Giants have to win at some point. And I'm sure the Giants are going to look to this game against Atlanta, albeit on the road, but to think with a rookie quarterback coming in that they're going to have a shot to win this game. Now, Penix, he's as cool as a cucumber, left-handed thrower. We saw him there last year in his own playoff run to a national championship game against the Wolverines. But for Penix, this is his opportunity here to show that he's a guy that's going to be trustworthy, a guy that's going to, I'm sure they're going to keep the offensive game plan very simple for him. Not to make big throws, not to make big plays, but they needed an infusion of some youth, maybe a bit more arm strength. Kirk Cousins, who, let's face it, not the strongest guy when it comes to his arm. Yes, he has ability, etc. But Penix Jr., let's see what he's going to do here. And I can't tell you if he's going to have a big game or not. I can look at it more of an indictment on the Giant defense, but the Giant offense is from hunger, knowing that they're going to start Drew Lock this week with Tommy DeVito on the shelf, and we know what's gone on there with the whole debacle surrounding Daniel Jones, him being shown the door a few weeks back, and Tim Boyle, Jet fans remember him from last year. So Drew Lock, I don't know what he's going to be able to add offensively. I'm sure he's going to keep the Falcons in the game. I'm sure the Falcons are going to try to run the ball down their throats with Bijan Robinson and company. But if Michael Penix shows you a little something, who knows? That could be a building block for him. Now they have to play Washington after that before closing out their season, I believe, at home against Carolina. So for the Falcons, let's see if Penix is going to be the answer here, at least for 1 week, on whether or not the Falcons are going to keep pace with the Buccaneers, who have a 1-game lead in the NFC South. But of course, Atlanta does have the tiebreaker. If they do happen to be in a flat-footed tie at the top of the division, the Falcons will have the advantage there and will be champs if it falls that way. And then the other storyline from this week was the Detroit Lions and how they've had to put a ton of these defensive players on IR, including David Montgomery, the running back. Now, you still have Jahmyr Gibbs, but that two-headed monster was certainly very effective in that high-octane Lion offense. But with all of the defensive players that have literally been dropping like flies, dating back to Aiden Hutchinson breaking his leg in Dallas, and there has been a report that Aiden Hutchinson could be Super Bowl ready if the team makes it that far. But you have to wonder, even if they get a bye, and even if they are able to get some rest, are they going to be able to carry enough, that defense, to get themselves to New Orleans in a Super Bowl? As of right this second, I don't know. I can't even tell you whether or not, with Aleem McNeil being out, the other corner who is out, who his mind is escaping me here, I think I could pull it up real quick. And for Montgomery, who has a sprained MCL, you're not going to see him for the rest of the year. Khalil Dorsey, that's right. He's going to be done with an ankle injury that's season ending. Carlton Davis, another guy who has some Super Bowl experience being a quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneer team of a few years ago. I mean, they might as well put me out there as corner because they are literally going to have to sign guys off the street, practice squad, etc., just to get them through these next 3 games. And as we talked about there on Monday, they're in a 3-way tie with the Vikings winning on Monday night against the Chicago Bears. There's a 3-way tie atop the NFC. Now, granted, the Lions do have destiny in their own control because they have tiebreakers over not only Minnesota since they beat them early in the regular season, but also Philadelphia with a better conference record. But if the Lions can't stop a nosebleed here over the next 3 weeks and slip up to where the Eagles overtake them, or dare I say, Minnesota, who has to go to Seattle this coming weekend, and then the game after that, I believe it's a division game. They play Green Bay in their building before having to go to Detroit. So not an easy schedule there for the Vikings, but stranger things have happened in the NFL, as we know. Will it be a scenario where if Detroit trips up here over the next couple of weeks and they go to Chicago this week before going to San Francisco, and San Francisco, I get it, they're another team that's been a mass unit all year and pretty much a dead team walking as they're not going to make the playoffs, but you would think that's a primetime game. I believe it's a Monday night. You know they're going to show up and show out as best as they can to upset the apple cart there for the Lions. So the Lions, again, it's all in front of them. If they run the table, they will have a 1 seed and they can rest people. Hopefully they won't have to worry about once they get to a week 18 and maybe they can rest a couple people then. Now, it's dangerous because if they were to do that, let's say if they have everything wrapped up before going into that week 18 matchup against the Vikings, that they could rest Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, a couple of defensive players that they have there. Now they're going to run the risk of having 3 weeks off before their first playoff game in the divisional round, which is always dicey. So that's the risk that they're going to take. But if I'm Dan Campbell, I would do that only because they just want to get to the finish line. And right now, they are literally running on fumes to the point where they're just hoping to get through these next 2 to 3 weeks as healthy as they possibly can, rest up with the bye, and then go at it there where they'll have the home field going through Ford Field for the postseason. And, I mean, that's all you can really hope for if you're a Lion fan. And someone from afar, knowing that the Lions had that great run last year, falling short in San Francisco, that they're a team that we've all talked about throughout the course of the year, being the NFL's best, top seed in the NFC, maybe even better than the Chiefs. And right now, with them being as nicked up as they are, could they even get out of the NFC? I can't give you that answer right now because I have to see who they're going to play first. It's easy to say on December 19th that, they're not going to make it because who are they going to have on defense? And I get it. But we're going to have to wait and see because in the first round, let's just say for argument's sake, if the Commanders, let's say they're the 7 seed and they upset the 2 seed, which would be Philadelphia as of right this moment, if they were able to upset them and Philly plays in Washington on Sunday, then Washington's going to play Detroit. And a lot of people are going to think, well, Detroit, they're going to be heavily favored and a lot of pressure, but you would look at that as not a cakewalk or not a shoo-in, but that would be a lot better than if they were to play a 4 seed when it's all said and done, who right now is, I believe, Tampa, if I'm not mistaken. Because they're in the NFC South, and the 3 seed, the Rams, I believe, have the tiebreaker over Tampa. So that is going to be a tricky proposition for the Lions. But again, we'll worry about that then. Right now, they're just going to try to remain as healthy as they possibly can and hopefully thwart and fend off the Eagles and the Vikings to get themselves that 1 seed and that much-deserved bye in the middle of January. And as far as the games this weekend, now I'll get to Saturday where you have Houston at Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes, who knows what his ankle, I'm sure it's going to be a game-time decision. Nothing has been brought about as to whether or not he's going to start in that game. As I have water splashing in my face if you're watching on YouTube. If you're Andy Reid, he said he was confident or is confident in Carson Wentz, the backup. And I just think Wentz has fallen on hard times ever since his early days in Philly. Not playing well in Washington. Certainly did not play well in Indianapolis. But I would think in that system, and even with the talent that they have, a team that is not like they were a few years ago, Travis Kelce a little long in the tooth, all right, you have DeAndre Hopkins, you have other guys, the Noah Grays of the world that obviously will be able to chip in. Isaiah Pacheco when healthy, but this isn't a stacked Chief team as we've seen in the past. In fact, they haven't even scored 31 points in a game this year. I think the one time they scored 30 was against the Panthers there a few weeks back. Other than that, they have not lit up the scoreboard as you've seen here throughout the course of the year. So for the Chiefs, as we talked about, whether or not that they're going to continue to eke out these games the way they have, and the Texans have not played well. They have not played crisp since the first half of the year. I can see the Chiefs winning this game. I would not be surprised in the least, and put themselves further ahead in light of them trying to win not only another 1 seed and have a bye, as it usually has been the case other than last year when it comes to the playoffs in the AFC. And the 4:30 game, Pittsburgh-Baltimore. What more can I say? Now, Pittsburgh, after that showing in Philadelphia, I know that they're going to be chomping at the bit to come back. We'll have to wait and see on TJ Watt, although based on what Mike Tomlin had said is that he feels fine, and even TJ Watt has said that, yes, I'm going to play here on Saturday, but how limited that ankle is going to be as far as his effectiveness trying to rush Lamar Jackson, that we're going to have to watch come 4:30 there on Fox. But for George Pickens, is he going to be in the lineup, which he's going to be desperately needed because he's their big-time threat there as far as a wideout goes. It's not just going to be all Calvin Austin III and Pat Freiermuth and Van Jefferson and guys like that. This is going to be a tooth and nail, I would think, nail biter. We know about the foe that the Pittsburgh Steelers put forth against Lamar Jackson is 1-4 lifetime against Pittsburgh. You know he's going to want to snap that. Listen, I said that a few weeks ago when Baltimore was in Pittsburgh. I thought that Lamar was going to be due. If he doesn't win this game against Pittsburgh, then I don't know when he's going to be Pittsburgh, because they know that if they win this game, they'll draw even with Pittsburgh. And you have to go conference record and things of that nature, which I believe right now the Steelers had the advantage because they only have 2 conference losses. And let me pull up these standings real quick. I believe the Ravens, they are 5-4 in the conference. So that bodes well for Pittsburgh, even if they lose here. And I understand common opponent is a factor. And I don't know if common opponent comes ahead of conference record, which it shouldn't, because it should be head-to-head, division, conference record, and then common opponent. But I'll have to look into that further. But right now, even if Pittsburgh loses, they would still have the division lead. But again, with a tricky schedule, with Kansas City having to come into their building on Christmas Day, and even though Baltimore has to go to Houston on Christmas Day as well, that's why both of those teams that are playing, or both of those games are being played on Saturday because of the short week and the turnaround. They have to play on Christmas Day, where Houston, Kansas City, and then Baltimore will face Houston, where Baltimore obviously will go to Houston after hosting Pittsburgh. We'll see. I think, and I'm not saying this to have a reverse jinx, I know he's going to want to get that piano off his back. And for the Ravens, who have gotten back on the beam here after having a late bye a couple weeks ago and beating up the Giants the way they did, and Lamar trying to throw his hat in the ring for a back-to-back MVP, although we all know it's Josh Allen. I'm not going to say there's no way Lamar Jackson can win it, but he already has 5 losses. The Bills without Josh Allen, listen, they're going to be a shell of their own selves. And for Jackson, you can say the same there, but we know that Josh Allen is the guy there in Buffalo and literally is going to be, I think, your MVP this forthcoming year. And then for Sunday schedule, I tell you, Sunday schedule is so bad that if you want to do any last-minute Christmas shopping, go right ahead. And in fact, this could be your only time to get away from the missus, the girlfriend, etc., because here is your 1 o'clock slate on Sunday. All right, you have Philly, Washington, I'll give you that. New York, Atlanta, not for me. Detroit and Chicago, I get the implications for Detroit, but Chicago, who knows? Windy city, the weather, one of the very few games that the Lions are playing outdoors. Okay, I'll give you that. Cleveland at Cincinnati, no thanks. Tennessee at Indianapolis, no thanks. Arizona at Carolina, no thanks. Although a lot is at stake for Arizona, as I detailed on Monday, because they still have a shot to win a division. Even at 7-7, and even with them being swept by Seattle. More on that come Monday. So that's your 1 o'clock. And then your 4 o'clock is Minnesota at Seattle. All right, good game. New England at Buffalo, I'll pass. Jacksonville at at Las Vegas, no way. San Francisco and Miami, on paper looks good, but that is a game that no one is going to care about. And your Sunday night game, they didn't even flex out of this, people. Tampa Bay at Dallas. Because you know, Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth, they're going to talk about how Dallas is still in it. Dallas is in the hunt. Nonsense. There is no way that the Cowboys are in the hunt. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. They're 6-8. Let them get to 500 first, and then we'll talk about in the hunt. Besides that, no way. And your Monday night game, New Orleans at Green Bay. Woo! This is what happens when you have all these mouths to feed. When you have Amazon, where you have a Saturday schedule with the college football done. I understand it's a playoff, but when the regular season's done, that's when the NFL could swoop in. When you have to put 2 good games there. And a Sunday night game where you have to settle Tampa at Dallas. And even if it was San Francisco, Miami, if both teams were good, there's no way that the folks at Fox are going to give up that game. I mean, it's just a mess. And I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I already know my stake or my stance on the NFL with all these networks and platforms that they have to cater to in order for them to put forth not just a good game, but even a decent game in order for people to watch. So that's what you have in the NFL. And Budda Baker got a 3-year extension in Arizona. He was in the last year of his contract. So who knows? Maybe he'll celebrate that with a win, because if they do win against Carolina, 8-7, and we'll see what happens there with the Rams. Rams and Jets, that's another game at 1 o'clock on Sunday, which I overlooked. So, and the Rams are going to have to keep themselves ahead of the curve there in the NFC, as they are in first place, tied with the Seahawks, but they have the advantage because they have beaten the Seahawks earlier this year. All right, now let me turn my attention as I lace up the high tops and go through the NBA. And we had an NBA Cup final, as you saw there on Tuesday night, the Milwaukee Bucks. And to me, this is more of a big picture thing than the actual game itself. And kudos to them and their defense. They literally shut down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He scored 21 points. He had to take 24 shots in the process and was 3 for 12 from behind the arc. Give it up for Andre Jackson, who defended SGA very well. And the Bucks, Giannis had a monster game, triple-double, block shots everywhere. Giannis looking like the beast that he is. Damian Lillard even with a contribution there. And if you want to congratulate them, all right, fine. They're your second NBA Cup champ to go along with the Lakers there of last year. But I think the one thing that they did, and smart in their own right, is to not pop champagne, drink, and celebrate to that degree. They passed on that because they didn't want to have a wild celebration, knowing that they would have to feel the effects of that throughout the first quarter plus of the season, having to run the table to get to this Cup final and win it against a young upstart team, as we know. And for the Bucks, maybe now they've turned the corner. Maybe the Bucks are going to be that team that we expect to be in the top 3 in the conference. And I have to say, as of right now, I think they're going to be. Now, they still have a lot of work to do. And interestingly enough, their first game right out of the gate is tomorrow in Cleveland. So I'm sure maybe in the back of their minds they knew about that. Certainly didn't overlook the Cup final by their dominance. 81 points by the Thunder. And the lowest amount that they've had this year as far as points scored in the game is 99. So for the Bucks to do work and to have that type of performance against that team says volumes. And this is one of the reasons why I feel that they may have turned the corner. Because now they believe, now they feel that 2-8 start, and 4-9 to start off the year is now a thing in the past. Now, again, they still have a ton to do here, because when we look at the standings, and remember that game against OKC did not count. That is just a standalone championship setting type game. But for the Bucks, who are 14-11, currently a 5th seed in the conference, they are a game and a half back of the Knicks and the Orlando Magic. But I could see them getting to a point where they'll be in that 3 seed and will be trying to rub elbows with both the Celtics and the Cavaliers as you get to, let's say, late January, right around the All-Star break. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't trust Doc Rivers despite the fact winning a title. And yes, he's a guy that very likable. A lot of people respect Doc Rivers, but his postseasons have been, let's face it, a lot to be desired here, dating back to his days as a Clipper coach and foiling a lot of 3-1 series leads and not being able to get over the hump and things of that nature. And then obviously what we saw in Philadelphia, how he was unable to get out of the second round. And we saw how his coaching career fizzled there in the city of brotherly love. And again, in the gut, I can't trust him in big spots. But maybe because of the talent that he has on that team, and he does have some DNA that has won titles and know their ways around winning. Giannis, Chris Middleton, if he could stay healthy, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, those are guys that have won on this team. So therefore, maybe they're starting to believe and push in the right direction on whether the Bucks could be a top 3 seed in the East and pretty much stamp themselves as a team, maybe to even actually come out of the East. Because they have the talent and they have the ability, but they haven't shown it based on what has transpired here over the last couple of years. So I am going to say that the Bucks have turned the corner and they've now going to make strides. But let's see how they come out of this NBA Cup championship, because we saw last year with the Lakers. Now they celebrated, they popped the champagne, etc., and they went into a funk after that, if you recall. They literally went backwards after winning the cup. And by not popping the champagne, by not celebrating to the hilt, they had to pipe down and kept it at bay. And we would think that that's going to be a plus for them, especially as they move along here, as they get to the second half of this NBA season. So I'll monitor that as we go along, but kudos to the Bucks and congratulations to them for winning an in-season championship. But you have that, and then I know a lot has been made here over the last couple of days about this NBA All-Star Game format. And I understand it's a little bit extreme and it's a little hokey-ish. And I understand the NHL has dabbled in this with having the 3 squads play in 3 periods. And then it's weird how the NHL breaks it down. And I believe they're going to do that again this year, if I'm not mistaken. Or they're doing that Power 4, whatever it is. And I understand the NHL's been tweaking that for a long time. And unless you're a dyed-in-the-wool hockey fan, you're not going to zero in or pay that much more attention on their All-Star Game format. I haven't heard a lot of backlash when it comes to the hockey fan in reference to that. But from the surface, yes, I don't like this either, where you're going to have 3 teams, 8 players, and then the 4th team is going to be the winner of the Rising Stars Challenge, which is in essence is the rookie sophomore game of years past. And for them to have this format the way it is, because they have to switch it up. They have to attempt to make this All-Star weekend, and in particular the game Sunday night, competitive. Because we've seen the Matador defense, the in-game slam dunk championship, the layup line to the basket, 3-pointers that are being shot from different zip codes throughout the court, that it was just a flat-out embarrassment and was highlighted and culminating by the 211-point performance, I believe, by the East or the West. I couldn't even tell you who it was because I didn't watch the game. But everybody slammed it from coast to coast. But now players want to lash out at it, Kevin Durant being one of them, saying that he hates it. That why can't we just have it go back to the old way of East versus West? And yeah, as the game goes deep, we'll start to get into it and play defense, etc. Well, Kevin, that's the problem. This is why they're changing it up. Because to a man, you guys are looking at this as pretty much a vacation. You have guys just parading to the basket, no defense whatsoever, and I don't want to hear, well, players don't want to get hurt. Nonsense. It's not as if this is a Game 7 of an NBA final. Nobody's saying that you have to play to that degree, but come on, how about manning up and D'ing up to the point where at least you're going to try to stop your guy? That you're just not going to let him stand at the 3-point line and then just have one arm raised high in the air to try to block or defend, or if he gets right past you to the basket, hopefully you'll get some help there to at least try to stop the guy. You don't see any effort whatsoever when it comes to these players in these All-Star games. So as much as you hate it, and as much as you could say, oh, this is the worst thing known to man, look in the mirror. You guys created this. So I don't want to hear how, and I agree with Durant and whomever else has come out to say that they can't stay in the format. Hand raise high in the air. I don't want to see that either. But one more time, you guys are the culprits. This could have been avoided. This could have been something that wouldn't even been on anybody's radar in the front offices down on Fifth Avenue when it comes to the NBA. But because this has been a unmitigated disaster, and it's been a situation where this has grown to the point where you had a team score 200 points or over 200 points in an All-Star game. This has been, little by little, riding high to the point where it just blew up in their faces last year. So guess what? They had to tweak it, they had to change it, and this is what they come up with. And you could blast it all you want. And even though people can say, well, Jay Rios, how could you agree with them but also blast them? Well, I'm not on the court playing these games. And right, if there was some defense, and I get it that the way the game has evolved, there's going to be three-point shooting, there's going to be everything that's going to tie into it. I understand. But if there is some defense, okay, you're going to have a 141, 135 game. We see that now in the NBA. And even if it's an all-star game where if a guy's going to the basket, all right, he wants to throw it off the glass and dunk it every once in a while, okay, we can accept that. So where the game goes to, let's say, even if it's a 159, 146 game, all right, it's a little outlandish, but okay, we get it. There's going to be moments in the game where you're going to see some high-flying acts or some alley-oops or behind-the-back passes. Okay, we get that. But not to the point of what we've seen here where teams have scored in the 170s, 180s, 190s, and 200s. Again, players, you got to look in the mirror as to why this is what it is. And the root of the problem are you guys. And if you played defense and showed a little competitive fire, we wouldn't have gotten to this place. So as much as you can't stand it, as much as you detest it, as much as you abhor it, look in the mirror. All on you. And that's it. You don't really have much on the schedule this week because obviously all the teams had not played yesterday. All the NBA had a day off after the Cup final. And as we look at the games forthcoming, I know Joel Embiid out with a sinus fracture that he suffered there last week against Indiana. So who knows how long he's going to be out. And I get it. He can't wear the mask, sinus. He's not being able to breathe or run up and down the court. All right. I don't want to knock Embiid for that, so I'll just leave that there. But your schedule here over the course of the next few days, you have some interesting games. OKC and Orlando. In fact, they're going to make their trek to Florida as they'll play the Heat there tomorrow night down in Miami. Tonight, you have a bunch of games as the league reconvenes after the in-season tournament. Golden State at Memphis. Clippers in Dallas, a rematch of the first round of last year, if you recall. Indiana at Phoenix. You'll have a return to Minnesota for one Karl Anthony Towns. That game on TNT tonight. What's the first game? OKC at Orlando. So I'm sure that's going to be emotional. You're going to have the video tribute, etc. Let's see how he plays, as he's had a very good year to start off his Knick tenure there at the Garden. So that's one that a lot of the Knick fans are going to be tuned into. And, of course, the NBA fan to see how Cat performs there in his own stomping grounds. Tomorrow, you have Milwaukee and Cleveland, as I talked about. Big game there. Into the weekend, Miami and Orlando. Golden State and Minnesota. LA's in Dallas. So they're going to play both of their games down there this weekend. Well, tonight into the weekend on Saturday. And then Sunday, you only have 3 games. Nothing really to write home about. That is your NBA here for this upcoming weekend. Let me lace up my skates and go through the National Hockey League as you had a trade there by the Rangers yet again. Lacing up my skates as I do so. The Rangers who traded Captain Jacob Trouba a couple weeks ago to Anaheim, and after just an inexplicable loss in Nashville, not only did they lose, they got shut out. And I don't know if Chris Drury, because of that, decided to say, well, I'm going to have to shake it up once again as they traded Kaapo Kakko, the second overall pick in the 2019 draft after Jack Hughes, who got drafted by the Devils in the first round. Shipped out of town to Seattle for defenseman Will Borden and a couple of picks there. On top of it, I believe they're going to get a third and a sixth round pick in the 2025 draft. So come next spring, next summer, they're going to get, I said Will Borden, it's Will Borgen. I said Borden, my apologies there to Will. So in the upcoming draft, they'll get a third and sixth round pick. And Kakko, a flat-out disappointment. There isn't any much more you could say for a guy when you're drafted number 2 overall and had put up very minimal numbers, had flashes, but certainly did not deliver the way a number 2 overall pick should. And it's interesting because early on between he and Alexis Lafreniere, you thought that maybe you could have 2 busts, quite possibly. But Lafreniere, who signed a long-term deal earlier this season, and Lafreniere obviously finally grew up and has not only shown flashes, but shown that he's a bona fide NHL player and now is starting to become a star, where Kakko has been quite the opposite. And let's see if a change of scenery is going to help for Kakko. He's only 23 years old, so it's not as if he's 27 and a guy that is never going to pan out. Maybe he needed to get out of New York, and not to say that the hockey media in New York is similar to the baseball or football media, but he was unable to find his footing here, was unable to be that guy as a high draft choice, as a guy number 2 overall that was going to flourish and going to take his game to bigger heights. Maybe he'll do so in Seattle. We'll see, but that was one that the Rangers, in spite of their free fall here, and that is what it's been. They started off the year, I'd have to go back and check what their high water mark is, and let me see, I'll do so right now. The Rangers, who had a very good start to their season, and for a team that I picked to go to a Stanley Cup final, a team that had Stanley Cup final aspirations dancing in their heads, considering that they made it to the conference finals in back-to-back years. And for them to just all of a sudden hit an abutment, hit the skids, to the point where now as I pull that up, no, I don't want the schedule. I want their overall standings, and bear with me here, people. For the Rangers to now have to put forth 2 trades in the last 2 weeks, and granted that Trouba was a guy that they wanted to deal in the offseason. Same for Kaapo Kakko, another guy that was being tossed around and even flirted as far as trade scenarios were concerned. I mean, think about this. The Ranger high water mark for this year, after winning in Detroit on November 9th, which was almost 6 weeks ago, they were 9-3-1. And since then, think about this, 6-12. That is as bad as it gets for a team with the stars that they have on their team. They extended or gave an extension to Igor Shesterkin, who arguably is the best goaltender in the sport. But with Artemi Panarin, Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, Alexis Lafreniere, I mean, this is a team that has a lot of weapons, a lot of offensive firepower. And they get shut out by a Nashville team who I picked as an over, as everybody knows who listens to the podcast, as far as their point totals go for the year. And they have been one of the worst teams in the sport this year. The Rangers had to do something. And Mika Zibanejad, he's another guy. How can I forget him? And hasn't performed to his level as he has in years past. I don't know what more is to say about this Rangers team. They're going to have to turn it around soon, and we'll take a look at their schedule here as we get to the weekend. But the Rangers, they have to do something because they have really turned their season on a dime after getting off to that hot start, and now 15-1 is their record. 6-12. They are playing at a .333 clip here over the last 18 games. If something doesn't change soon, who knows what's going to happen? Is Peter Laviolette going to be on his way out? And Lord knows he's had a million coaching jobs in the sport, from the Islanders to the Flyers to Carolina, where he won a Stanley Cup there, but I might add. I mean, a million teams, Capitals, who knows? Rangers could be the next team in his wake as far as looking for another job at some point down the road. So keep that in mind. But as we get to the rest of what's happening, I know I talked about Florida and Edmonton. And Florida's actually played well on this road trip to where they won in Edmonton. Monday night, the Stanley Cup rematch, which was not on any of the major networks, which was shocking to me, considering that they had a very good and which was an epic Stanley Cup final, considering that Edmonton had to come back from a 0-3 deficit to push it to a Game 7. But they had a lead there and give it up to Carter Verhaeghe, who is, to me, one of the most underrated players in the sport, and a guy that has always been clutch, had the game-winning goal there in Edmonton to win that rematch there, and then on top of that, won in Minnesota there last night. So Florida continuing to play well, close to the top of the Atlantic Division, which currently is being held by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Maple Leafs flying high, playing well in their own right. So give it up to them. But besides that, everything is pretty much status quo in the sport. Not many other teams have taken off. In fact, the Panthers have drawn even with the Maple Leafs at the top of the division. Devils now a point ahead of the Capitals in the Metropolitan. Winnipeg is now 3 points ahead of Minnesota in the Central. And Vegas, 3 points ahead of the Kings there. And the Kings are on a long road trip. East Coast, they had the 3 games in New York, as you know. Lost in Pittsburgh. They play in Philadelphia tonight. I believe they go to Nashville over the weekend. Washington on Sunday. I mean, they are on a road trip from hell there, the Kings. So give it up as they try to stem the tide there back east during the early or late part of fall into the early part of winter. So give them credit. And who do they have on the docket here in the days to come? Schedule: Blues in Tampa, LA and Philadelphia, as I mentioned. Boston and Edmonton, Vancouver at Vegas. Tomorrow, St. Louis, Florida. Rangers in Dallas. That's not going to be an easy game. Colorado, Anaheim, Utah, Minnesota. Saturday into the weekend. And these are just the games of note, people. Minnesota at Winnipeg. Big game there. 2 teams fighting it out there in the Central. And then Sunday, Carolina at the Garden to play the Rangers. Florida at Tampa. LA at Washington. That is pretty much Seattle at Colorado. That is the main games there as far as the NHL goes. And I'll wrap up here with the baseball as I get into the batter's box, because the Yankees continue to be aggressive. The Yankees are a team that, after losing out on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, they have certainly been a team that has been active, a team that looks like they've had a plan B. We've talked about them bringing in the likes of a closer and one Devin Williams, although he's in a walk year, but they brought him in. They also bring in Cody Bellinger as another guy who's going to be a major focal point of this offense on top of Max Fried, as we know, for a starting rotation. So they added to their rotation, they added to their bullpen, and with now Bellinger in the fold, as they traded with the Cubs for one Cody Poteet, a reliever who's 30 years of age, and even the Cubs sent $5 million back. Goes to show you how much the Yankees have gotten nothing for Bellinger, and not to say that Bellinger is anything close to the MVP caliber player and former Rookie of the Year that he was dating back to the late 20-teens. But as good of a fit that Bellinger is going to be, I think, into this lineup, to put him between Judge and Giancarlo. But Bellinger, I get it. He's going to have protection in the lineup. And with that short porch, I think, I don't want to say he's going to be feast or famine. I can't predict that. But Bellinger, the back of his baseball card is very early career heavy. I mean, he put up prodigious numbers in LA early on. And pretty much from the latter part of 2020, if you recall, that World Series run during the pandemic season, he was an automatic out in the playoffs. I mean, the guy was striking out at an epic clip. And I understand that's now 5 years ago. But he has not been anywhere close to the MVP player that he was in the early part of his Dodger career. Now, granted, he's had a couple of good seasons in Chicago, more so 2 years ago than last year. And I'm going to pull up his numbers now to back it up. And I understand that there's also a connection there because remember, Clay Bellinger, his dad, was on those Yankee teams. I believe he was on the 96 Yankee team. So I'm sure his father is ecstatic knowing that he's going to be donning the pinstripes come late February. But here's Cody Bellinger from early to late. Rookie year, 39.97, 267. All right, the average, whatever. And we know the strikeout total is going to be bad. We understand everybody strikes out. The next year, 2018, played in every game, 25.76, batted 260. Now, 2019 was his MVP year, a high WAR, 8.6, 47, 115, 305, OPS of over 1,000. That's a Hall of Fame type year. Then the pandemic year, all right, you have to throw that out. The following year, he was injured, played in 95 games, 1036, batted 240. 22, 144 games this last year in LA, I might add. 1968, batted 210. 2023, first year in Chicago, respectable. 2697, 307, his OPS was 881. And then last year, 130 games, 1878, 266. I mean, he has not ripped the cover off the ball. Now, I understand he's going to a much better lineup. The Cubs, they really aren't stacked. And even with those Dodger teams, 2022, he had Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, that was his first year in LA. And for him to have 1968 and bat 210, where he had protection, and now he's going into a lineup that, yes, has more protection or comparable protection to what he had in LA. Short porch, I get it. Dodger Stadium is a pitcher's ballpark. I don't know. I hate to say it, and he's 29 years of age. But if there's ever a term or ever a reason to have a player, day-to-day player, have a long odometer, even at 29 years of age, it has to be Bellinger. And he could be great or he could be bad. And bad would be 20 home runs, 80 RBIs, because if Yankee fans are expecting, let's say 28 to 32, 95 to 105, and to bat 280, that may be expecting a lot even with Judge in the lineup. I think you probably have to go a little south of that in order for him to have a good year. That's just me. But I think it was a good move. The Yankees gave up nothing. So, and I think he's going to flourish in that ballpark and in that stadium against those opponents and to be in that lineup. Now, the flip side of that is what's going on in Queens. And this is a memo to Steve Cohen and to David Stearns. The offseason isn't done. Yes, you got Juan Soto, but that parade and that celebration is over. It is time to go to work. It is time to take your feet off the top of the desk and start getting on the phone and start making some deals here. And no, Jared Young is not the answer, the backup infielder. And hell no to Griffin Canning. Who? Griffin Canning, the former Angel pitcher who, when I last checked, his career numbers are 25 and 34 with an ERA almost 5, 4.76 to be exact. That is not cutting it if you're a front office executive and especially for a Met fan. One more time, if they want to make a splash, I understand. I don't want Corbin Burns. Sign Walker Buehler. Sign him to a deal that's maybe a little bit less but comparable to what Blake Snell got. Yes, I don't want to pay him $30 million a year, but if you're going to give him, let's say, a 5-year deal and he could opt out after 3, or maybe a 4-year deal where he could opt out after 2, you want to pay him $410? Please, be my guest. I know the Mets don't give out long-term deals to pitchers. Yohan Santana, I know Jacob deGrom, 5 years when he was in the midst of his heyday. But they got to do something. Your rotation right now is Kodai Senga, Frankie Montas, David Peterson, I hate to say it, Clay Holmes, and Tyler McGill, or if you want to throw in Griffin Canning, or you want to throw in Paul Blackburn. I mean, this is not a rotation that is going to strike fear in any opposing lineup. They're going to have to do something. And that's on top of fixing the bullpen. And that's on top of, oh, is Pete Alonso coming back? And that's on top of, oh, we need a center fielder. Guys, let's wake up. Let's go. Let's get cracking. It is not February the 10th where pitchers and catchers are going to report in the next week or so. It is December 19th. You still have time. Something has to be done. And I don't want to make this a Met-Yankee thing, but when you see the Yankees making moves, knowing that they went to a World Series and are not resting on their laurels, where the Mets went to an NLCS unexpectedly, got their guy, but now it's like, all right, let's just take a breather. All right, we'll see what's happening here. Oh, Griffin Canning? Oh, all right, you know what? Our analytics department or our pitching coach, Jeremy Hefner, who did a fantastic job, I get it. But Jeremy Hefner is no Leo Mazzoni. Look him up. Let's go. Let's get cracking. Come on. No more on the Mets. No more. And then Nolan Arenado in closing. Well, I still got to get to one other thing after this. And I know this has gone on a little bit longer here with the podcast, people. So I appreciate you hanging out with me for those who are watching or listening, because usually I try to wrap it up in an hour and 10, hour and 12. There's a lot going on in sports, but I still have one more topic to get into. But Nolan Arenado blocked a trade going to Houston. Now, I don't know what the particulars were, who the Cardinals are going to get back in this trade. And remember, he does have a no trade, although he does have a list of teams he wants to go to. But considering that Houston right now looks like they're going to be a team that is, I don't want to say rebuilding, but they have been unloading. Obviously, the scenario with Kyle Tucker going to the Cubs. Alex Bregman is a free agent. He may be going elsewhere, maybe one of the New York teams, who knows? There's been rumored about Framber Valdez. So, yeah, if I'm Nolan Arenado, I don't want to go to Houston either, even though they still have Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez. So we'll see what's going to happen with Arenado in the days and weeks to come. But that's what you have with baseball. And then finally, as I put on the boxing gloves and get into the ring to discuss a heavyweight fight for 3 belts, I might add, because one of the belts was dismissed there as your current heavyweight champ. And that's one thing. Think about this. If I were to ask the sports fan, and a good sports fan, who the heavyweight championship belt belongs to, I'm sure quite a few are going to say, I don't know. There may be some that will say Tyson Fury. And if you would have asked me this question prior to earlier this week, I probably would have said Tyson Fury as well. It is not. It is Oleksandr Usyk. And they fought back in May to where Usyk won a split decision, helped by a 9th round knockdown of Fury. But with the fight being in Saudi Arabia on Saturday, I know there's going to be a time difference, so with the fight probably going to be, I think, 5 o'clock here, or I don't know, I don't even know the time difference, if it's going to be Sunday morning or if it's going to be late Saturday night. I think it's probably going to be Sunday morning, afternoon, where you'll watch the fight here roughly 10 p.m. Eastern, or however that's going to be. But for the fight fan, this is how bad boxing has gotten, because when you were the heavyweight champion of the world, that meant you are above just about any other position in the world of sports. Yes, more so than the center fielder of the New York Yankees, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, the center of the Los Angeles Lakers. There were very few titles that when you held, and not even talking about best players of the sport, whatever, heavyweight champ, that spoke volumes decades ago. When you walked into a room and you were Muhammad Ali or even Mike Tyson, just those 2 guys alone, dare I even say, going way back, Rocky Marciano, undefeated, heavyweight champ, that now it is beyond an afterthought. Heavyweight champ doesn't mean anything anymore the way it once did. To say you were the heavyweight champion in 2024 is like, oh, is he? Oh, okay. Not, oh, wow, you revered that person. When you looked at those aforementioned guys, it's like, whoa, this is the heavyweight champ on the planet. And now it's like, okay, so what? Big whoop. Okay, I mean, it's just, that just goes to show you how far boxing has fallen. And I would think Tyson Fury is going to want to get that title back. He's going to want to show the world. And I know Fury is like a lumbering guy. Obviously, he's not the most fit guy when you see him in there. He gets the job done. Didn't do so against Usyk there back in May, but will I tune in? That's the big question. I'll have to find out what time the fight is. I guess I'm going to have to keep my fingers on the pulse to see what's going to go on. So yes, I will check to see when the fight, I know it's on DAZN. So for those who are going to watch, obviously it's on that network or on that platform. But yeah, we'll see what's going to happen. Usyk, Fury, round 2 on whether or not Fury could show some redemption or Usyk is just going to beat up Fury again to the point where there probably won't be a third fight somewhere down the road. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. I know it was a little lengthy one, but obviously a lot cooking in the world of sports, and I'm glad to bring it to you not only each and every week, but twice a week, as you all know. Talking sports, what I love, and if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you know the drill. Also on YouTube at JReels, that would be important. If you go to that platform and subscribe there, as I try to build, as I have been building, I should say, not try to, I've been building that channel and trying to get it out there to the masses. So if you could play your part, take a screenshot, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, share with your friends, family, foes, frenemies, etc. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. And if you have a question or comment, you could do so at the following. Send it to any of my socials. Again, on YouTube at JReels, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, the JReels, or I should say Twitter, JReels1, just the number, or the JReels Podcast at gmail.com. That's the email address. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, so please hit me up, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. Sports has been in the blood since birth. It's in my DNA. You can wake me up at any point, at any time, anywhere, and I'll be there ready to go. Trying to blaze a path and trail, carve out in this industry as an independent content creator, full-time, trying to make myself a known commodity here. That's where I need your help, people, because I'm going nowhere. As long as I'm alive and breathing on God's green earth, I will continue in front of this camera and microphone to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JReels Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JReels Podcast, on the flip, baby.